So walk us through your love of Porcupine Tree, which I see is in the top 20.
Oh yeah, again, it's just like I was talking about, like how diverse releases are this year. I mean, Porcupine Tree are just completely on the other end of the spectrum. We're talking about like Devil Driver and Five Finger. I mean, Porcupine Tree are just absolutely elegant and sophisticated and gorgeous, and it's not an obvious metal record, but there are those elements that are there. Of course, if anyone listens to Opeth, it's very hard not to kind of spot the references that they make, because of course Steve Wilson, the mastermind behind Porcupine Tree, is responsible for so much of Opeth's sound, for influencing Mike Ackerfeld in that way in the studio, because he actually worked on those records with Mike. And that's why I think a lot of people have probably discovered Porcupine Tree is via that route. But the fact is they've been around for decades, and like the incident is just absolutely breathtaking. I mean, it's not an immediate record. There's no radio single, but that's the point of it. It's like you have to give it time to absorb it, but it is so expansive and epic that I can't recommend it highly enough.
And it may not be, as you say, sort of like a Slayer record or Devil Driver in terms of heaviness, but it has a heavy metal intensity and a heavy metal darkness to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's got those flourishes. I mean, the thing is that if you kind of liken a musician to a painter, Steve Wilson paints with a full palette in every color, and metal is just one of those. There are other elements as well, but it always gets back to the heaviness. And of course, like being into heavy metal, I usually listen for the heavy bits. That's when the song all comes together. But it's a crescendo. It's a slow build as opposed to just getting right to it.
Deferred gratification.
Indeed.
And how do you think it kind of stands up with comparison to the last album, Fear of a Blank Planet, which again I was a big fan of?
Oh yeah, but interestingly, I think that actually turned away a lot of sort of long-time Porcupine Tree fans who weren't accustomed to that heaviness, whereas for a lot of other people, that was actually an entry point. That was the first record that they heard by Porcupine Tree. So I think that album divides opinions slightly, but I think it's a wonderful one nonetheless. However, I do think that The Incident is a completely different kind of record, and a bit of a refinement, if you will, when it comes to that kind of sound.
Also, sort of right out of left field, we totally didn't see this one coming. City of Fire.
Oh, amazing!
The project and
absolutely incredible. I mean, there's been so much talk about Fear Factory resurfacing, after a long hiatus, and of course, I think it would be a terrible shame if we actually overlooked something that happened before all that was coming together, which is basically City of Fire. It's the record with Burton C. Bell and Byron Stroud. And it's so gorgeous. It's not a Fear Factory record. It is something completely different and beautiful and heavy and gorgeous. It's really, really unique. It's a shame that not more people have heard it. They're going to be touring the UK in January, and I do hope people go out and go see them. Go and check out the record as well, because they've done something magnificent there.
Do you think it's kind of it's interesting because it's a side project? They're able to dare to do things, as they said they didn't have any limits or no expectations.
Oh yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think that they basically came to it with a blank canvas. There's no expectations there. Of course, people knowing that the pedigree is that of Fear Factory and Strapping and Lad might actually think that it's going to sound like a combination of those two things, but it absolutely doesn't. It's a really unique thing. And again, I can't say enough good things about how diverse that record is. It's absolutely wonderful.
And finally, one that's in many a top 20 of the year, Lamb of God.
Yeah, completely. Well, it's just like they don't disappoint at any level. It's just like, of course, like amazing live, but of course, just Sacrament was awesome, but with Wrath they just stepped it up a notch. It's just Lamb of God are absolutely at the forefront. Of course, no small feat for them to be out on tour with Metallica, throughout the States, of course, and they were personally chosen by Metallica to tour with them. And, I think that there's a good reason for that. It's just because in terms of what Metallica may have represented, in the 80s when they were kind of, just stepping into arenas for the first time, Lamb of God are doing that now alongside bands like Machine Head, who've really kind of captured people's imagination, but they've also really kind of showed that they can step up to the plate on the live stage. So they play heavy, but they also can perform heavy too.
And that's again one of the things that I think they've managed to do that so few bands, maybe Amon Amarth is one of the only other bands I can think of who have managed to stay so completely uncompromisingly and unrelentingly heavy, but brought massive hooks, and they're still tuned. I could hum you a Lamb of God tune.
Oh, absolutely. But I think that's it's a credit to the stability and the ongoing longevity of heavy metal as an art form. That they've actually been successful as they have been, that they don't have to compromise their sound in order to get radio play or anything else like that. It's just like, people have met them halfway. And that's a really cool thing, that there are bands that are able to do that and get that successful these days, because, of course, the chorus is that the music industry is changing. it's undergoing all these transformations and all that, but no, really good bands still can get somewhere today.
And also I think a part of that for me anyway is that Randy is again a frontman who is genuinely pissed off, and you genuinely get what he's thinking. He doesn't play the media game.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting point that Randy's background is punk rock, and of course he's incredibly well read, incredibly literate, and you do get a sense that he's really feeling the kind of anger and contempt that he kind of expresses on stage and all that. It's not really an act for him. I think that he genuinely is behind the sort of words and things that he's expressing up there, and I think that's what makes it really interesting to see, because it's not Kiss pyrotechnics, it's not like over the top kind of production or anything like that. It's simply a person up there performing in an almost thespian way. I mean, I think he conveys this power and energy that just completely overpowers audiences. I mean, it's an incredible thing to see live, but they can do it on record too, and that's the bottom line.
And one last one. Who thought that the new Mastodon album was going to sound like this?
Oh, no one had any idea at all. I mean, that's a band that's completely unique and just I think it kind of unites everybody. I mean, just like it doesn't matter what your background is, what your preference is in heavy metal or in music. But that is a work of art. I mean, just what they've done is not just a concept record that it's got like weird notions of like astral projection and just like Rasputin and just like all this kind of stuff. Like what they've done is actually sonically beautiful. There's no other way to describe it. It's a gorgeous record. Full of all these melodies and heaviness and all that. And of course, if you're lucky enough to see them earlier in the year when they toured the UK, that they can do it live too, which is great because that's not an easy thing to pull off. But it's just like they've kind of like gone from this really heavy kind of obscure kind of band to kind of like this universally praised art metal band, and it's a wonderful thing to see, because I think it's actually brought a lot of people into the music that wouldn't listen to it otherwise because all they see are the stereotypes, all they see are the common threads, but Mastodon are truly unique. They're a genre of one, and of course, you can't listen to them without really tipping the hat to Neurosis, the band who really, I think, generated and inspired them. Of course, Mastodon are the first to admit that happened. And I think that's a wonderful thing to see that evolution happening, to see that the seeds that were planted by bands like Neurosis blossoming in such a magnificent fashion, because absolutely, hands down, one of the best albums of the decade. We're not talking about 2009, of the decade. Amazing.
And also, isn't it such a triumph to not only have a heavy record up there, charting so well and sort of reaching so broadly with people, but also one that is progressive. It is a progressive record.
Oh, completely. It's challenging.
It's not an easy record.
No, not at all. There are no radio jingles. There are no kind of commercial ad breaks on that record at all. It is completely colossal and magnificent. There's zero compromise in there, but there are some gorgeous tunes, but there's also just like this completely crushing kind of heaviness that's there. It's not just about just heavy riffing or anything like that. It's just like this density of sound. There's so many layers in there. Of course, the guy who produced the last AC/DC record put it together, so maybe that has something to do with it.
I often feel like, and even by Blood Mountain with Mastodon, there are elements that you feel that are their signature sound that come around again and again. There's little motifs, but I just felt like on this new record there was nothing I'd heard before.
Yeah,
like musically.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, they are unique. They're not reinventing the wheel or anything like that. They've like invented a square or something like that. Of course, and if you actually speak with them, I think it's very interesting to discover just what their influences are, because they're not just talking about heavy metal. I mean, there are bands like that they reference, but they also talk about Frank Zappa and Motown and, just like, classic blues and stuff like that you wouldn't necessarily expect to hear in an interview about a band that is essentially a really, really heavy band. But that's the thing. It's like, Brent Hines told me that he listened to Frank Zappa like every night between 11 and midnight or something like that. Like it's almost on a schedule. And of course, if you know Frank Zappa, you know how weird he is and all that, but that's what inspires their sound, because it's just like music without limitation.
I mean, there are four eccentrics in that band.
Yeah.
Do you think that's kind of part of what makes them, that it's the amalgam of all of those personalities?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's an unrepeatable chemical reaction, that happens when those guys get in the studio and write songs. I mean, it's just like, how many bands can you name where the drummer seems to put together more tunes than anyone else? It's because they're they've got a virtuoso drummer. They've got absolutely bonkers musicianship in there, and I think it shows them what they're able to put together. There will never be a repeat of that band. There's just one Mastodon.